Good afternoon, everyone. I am Yin Hua from Graduate Institute of Athletics and Coaching Science of National Taiwan Sports University. Today, it's such an honor to talk with you about the optimal theory of motor learning, and I hope this will bring some new input or inspirations to your coaching or training style. Okay, so the optimum is actually an acronym, and that stands for optimizing performance through intrinsic motivation and attention for learning. So you can find here two factors are important in this theory. First one is motivation, and second one is attention. This theory is proposed by Wolf and Leswick. So let's look at the details. In this figure, you can find the two factors, namely motivation and attention, can bring the stronger coupling between the goal and the action. And that will make the learners have greater focus on the task itself. And that will return to increase the motor performance during the learning. In terms of the motivation, there are two elements. The first one is autonomy support, and the second one is enhanced expectancies. Whereas in the attention part, the external focus of attention is more suggested compared to the internal focus of attention. Now let's look at the first part. Try to think, usually when you train your athletes, what kind of instruction you often give? It's more like, okay, today you're gonna work out with training A, or would you like to work out with training A or training B? Meaning you give some choices to your athletes. And does that make difference? Okay, in this study, a world champion of kickboxer was examined. In this study, he was asked to perform some punches in his training, and there are two different conditions. In the first one, that is control condition, he has to perform the punches in a predetermined order, which is lead straight, rear straight, lead hook, and rear hook. Then in another condition, there is the so-called choice conditions. Both conditions are 6 days of training. In the choice conditions, the athlete can choose the order of the punch as he wants. And you can find that in these 6 days, he has very different orders between days. And let's look at the performance. Here we can see in the x-axis, there are 4 different types of the punch. And in figure A, you can find no matter in which type of the punches, the choice conditions always has the greater force compared to the control conditions. And in terms of the velocity, it's the same story, meaning when the athletes can choose the order of the punch, even it's just a minor change of the training, the force generated and also the velocity is much better than when he is asked to follow a fixed training program. So the researchers are wondering whether this kind of effect can be also found in intermediate players. So in a follow-up study, they recruited a group of amateur kickboxers, and the same training conditions were compared. And here we can find actually there is a very similar pattern, meaning when the kickboxers can have choices, the performance is better in terms of the force and the velocity of the punch. But slight difference is that in the lead straight punch, the difference might be not that obvious compared to the real hook punch. So here give us a hint that maybe due to the skill level, we can find this effect differently. Then let's look at the second part of the motivation, which is the enhanced expectancies, meaning the higher expectation to the future outcome of the performance. So try to think, how do you give the feedback to your athletes when you tell them the result of the performance? Usually you give it on good performances or poor performances. Are they different? Okay, in this study, the researchers wanted to know whether this kind of information can affect the learner's learning. So a group of college students were asked to throw a tennis ball with their non-dominant hand. And in order to avoid them of knowing their result of performance, they were asked to wear a vision distorting goggle. Okay. And the students are divided into two groups. In one group, they can get the knowledge of result, which is KR, from the best 3 performances. And the other group, they also receive the KR, but that's based on their 3 worst performances. And let's look at the result in terms of their accuracy. In the beginning of the training, they were similar, but as a function of the training, you can find that the group that received the KR of their good performances, they improve their performance along the training as well as in a retention test, which is 2 days after the training program. And the KR, the group that received the KR based on their poor performances, the accuracy score was not that stable and it was lower in the retention test. Okay, this is the performance. And psychologically, when they were asked about their confidence, their self-efficacy of the performance, we can find again, in the beginning, the two groups were not different, but along the training, the KR good group, they constantly increase their self-efficacy level, and the other group gradually decrease this level. So this study show us that when you give feedback to your athletes, if you can specify this feedback based on the good performances, maybe it's more beneficial to your athletes, both psychologically and practically. Then let's think, what is the content you often give to your athletes? It's more like, oh, you are doing great, good job. Or, no, you made a mistake. This part is wrong. And let's see whether they are different. So in this study, very skilled runners were invited to the lab to run on a treadmill based on 75 of their best performance. So the oxygen consumption was measured during the run. The runners were divided into two groups. In one group called enhanced expectancy group, they were given the comments on their run every 2 minutes after the 10 minutes of run, such as, oh, you are doing great, you look very relaxed, or your oxygen consumption is in the top 10th percentile of your age group, or you are a very efficient runner. Okay, now pay attention that this comment might be not true. It's just fabricated. Okay, and for the other group, which is the control group, they didn't receive any comments on their run. And this is the VO2 consumption during the run. And we can see for the control group, the VO2 consumption is quite stable. But for the enhanced expectancy group, there is a trend of decrease of VO2 consumption, meaning they can maintain the speed as required, but the enhanced expectancy group can achieve this goal with lower VO2 consumption, meaning they were more efficient. And about their perception of their performance, the control group were not different between pre and post test, but the enhanced efficiency group showed a significant increase after the test, meaning after the measurement, after being told of the fabricated comments, they become even more convinced of their performance, which is a positive psychological effect. Okay, now this is an interesting part. Nowadays, we can have video cameras or mobiles very easily, so we often video tap or record the player's movement and show them immediately, right? To demonstrate how did they perform. And try to think usually what kind of feedback you give to your athletes. It's more like, look how well you have done in this part, it's very good. Or, oh, this is the part that I always mention. From here to here, you made this kind of mistake. Okay. And are they different? Okay, this group of researchers were interested in this question. And since it's already a very common used method to give the learner see how they perform, which is self-model, they further ask whether seeing good movement can enhance their learning to a greater extent. So 3 groups of kids were investigated. They came to the swimming camp with similar skill level, and they are similar in terms of age and gender distribution. The experimenter video tap the kids' swimming movement, and for the self-observation group, they could see the video of their swimming movement, the swimming for 10 meters every day before the training. And the videos is how they performed the previous day, the day before. Okay, And for the self-modeling group, they could also see a video, but the difference is the video is edited by the experimenter. The experimenter specifically chose the good movement and edited in a way that when the kids see the video, they only see the good movement they performed. So they are not only seeing their movement, but they only see the good movement. And let's see, this is the performance score. In the beginning of the training, they were not different. And as when the training is in a mid-session and also in the retention, we can find the self-modeling group is way better than the other two groups. Okay, and then the other two groups has no difference. Now let's look at their motivation level. In the beginning of the training, the three groups were not different, but when the training continues and until the retention test, we find that the self-modeling group has higher and higher motivation level compared to the other two groups. The self-observation group also show a bit higher motivation compared to how they perceive in the beginning. But this difference is not as much as the self-modeling group. So this means seeing the videos of one's own movement might be helpful psychologically because it brings higher motivation level. But in terms of movement per se, maybe the self-modeling way is a bit better. And this is another way to make your athletes feel the what they are doing is easier. So here we can see the circle in the middle is actually the same size between these two figures, but due to the circles surrounded, they were perceived differently. In the left side, the surrounding circles were bigger, so the middle one is perceived smaller. Whereas in the right side, the surrounding circles are smaller, so the middle one is perceived bigger. Okay, in this study, the golfers were asked to perform a golf putting to this hole, and let's see their performance. Okay, in the y-axis is the deviation from the hole, so the smaller, the better the performance. And we can find, as a function of the training, the group that perceived the large hole showing better performance compared to the other group, which is when you perceive your task being easier, you perform better. And psychologically, let's look at their self-efficacy level. The group that perceive the large hole, they have higher self-efficacy from the beginning to the end, meaning before practice, after practice, and before retention. They always feel they can perform better, or they have higher confidence level to how they would perform. So this might give you an idea that maybe you can be more creative or try to use this illusion effect to make the training become easier to your athletes, even though they are the same. So what is the underlying mechanism of the effect of motivation? Well, in neuroscience aspect, this might be related to the increased release of the dopamine. Okay, we can see from the figure, the dopamine is shown in a blue dot, and it's released from the substantia nigra, ventromedial prefrontal cortex to sensory motor cortex. So this kind of circular, this kind of circuit can bring higher interaction between the cortex, and that might be more helpful the execution of the movement. However, this is still a hypothesis, and we don't have very direct measurement and investigation so far. So it still requires more scientific, more neuroscience studies to confirm this hypothesis. Then let's look the second factor of the theory, which is the attention. Now try to think usually what kind of instruction you give to your athletes. Something like focus on your shoulder, or hey, pay more attention to the bowstring or any implement or equipment. And are they different? Okay, let's explain what is external and what is internal focus of attention. External focus of attention is to concentrate on intended movement effect or the environment. Instead, the internal focus of attention is to concentrate on the body movement. So take archery as example. The external focus of attention might be to concentrate on the ball, the string, the target, and the internal focus of attention is to concentrate on shoulder, arm, wrist, or any body movement, any body part. So are they different? In one of the early study of Wolf, she tests this idea in learning ski on a ski simulators. So the instruction is to tell the learner to concentrate on the outer feet or on the wheels near the feet. So you can see, especially it's actually very close between these two instructions. However, these really make difference. In the beginning of the training, the three groups, internal focus of attention, external focus of attention, or control group, were not different. The control group didn't receive any feedback. They were not different in the beginning. But the external focus of attention group improve their performance during the practice as well as in the retention test. And more surprisingly is that the group of internal focus of attention, the performance was even worse than the group of receiving no feedback or no instruction. So giving instructions specifically on the body part might be detrimental to the learners. So not only in terms of the movement outcome, let's look whether it also has some effect on the movement form. So in this study, players were asked to generate a backswing to carry the golf ball as far as possible. And for the external focus of attention is to push against the left side of the ground as you hit the ball. And for the internal focus of attention is to transfer your weight to your left foot as you hit the ball. So let's look whether these two kinds of instruction make difference. So this is the carry distance of the movement. So the greater the better. And we can find that the group of external focus of attention indeed show better performance compared to the other two groups. And the other two groups seem to have no difference. And one thing to be noted is the improvement is continuous during the training. Now let's look at the movement, the coordination of the movement. So this is the angle between the shoulders and the pelvis. So the greater the greater the angle, the greater the rotation, which is a typical index to evaluate the movement. And we find that indeed the external focus of attention group show greater angle, meaning they have the greater rotation of the body to achieve this goal. So here we found evidence that giving different kind of instruction can also make difference in terms of the movement coordination. Okay, so we know external focus of attention is helpful in terms of the movement outcome and the movement coordination. And how about the movement efficiency? Okay, so in this study, the task is to push against the force platform to generate 30% of the maximum force. The external focus of attention group, they were instructed to push against the platform. And the group of internal focus of attention is instructed to push with the muscle of the calf. And this is the result of one subject. You can see that during the phase of external focus of attention, the muscle, which is the soleus, is activated, and the antagonist muscle, which is tibialis anterior, is silent. Okay, so meaning there is a good coordination between the two muscles. Let's look at the internal focus of attention phase. Here, even though the soleus is very much activated, which is very helpful, but the antagonist, which is the tibialis anterior, is also activated, meaning the two muscles are co-contracted. So there is a lower efficiency of the use of the muscle during the phase of internal focus of attention. So this gives us an idea that even though the movement outcome can be the same, but using external focus of attention can make you generate your movement more efficiently at the neuromuscular level. Okay, so what is the underlying neuromechanism? So this researcher proposed that when adopting an external focus of attention, based on previous result of fMRI and TMS study, there is a higher activation in the somatosensory cortex, which is the red part of the left figure. And when adopting an internal focus of attention, only the primary motor cortex is activated, meaning or implying that when applying the external focus of attention, more interaction or more communication is between the somatosensory cortex and primary motor cortex. So the neural resources is used in a more efficient way or more in a more efficient way in terms of the use of primary motor cortex because it gets more help from the other cortex. But again, this also requires more research to directly test these hypotheses. Okay, so let's make a summary. In optimal theory, giving autonomous support and enhance expectancy, also directing the attention focus to externally environment or implement can promote the goal action coupling. And this will help the learner to decrease the self-focus on body, but increase the focus on the task itself. And that will promote the motor automaticity and then increase the motor performance. And this is gonna be a virtuous cycle. So due to the better performance, there is a higher motivation, and then players can improve more and more. The final part I want to end is whether these three parts are even better when they are added in combination. And the answer is yes. In this study, there is the combination of every two different components, meaning enhanced expectancy, autonomous support, or external focus of attention. And we can see the accuracy is the highest when three of the components are combined. Okay, so this is just an example to show you that maybe you can start to add little by little this element to your training or your coaching program, and that will help your athlete. Okay, that's it. And I look forward to your comments and questions. Thank you very much. Thank you for your listening.